massacres and deportation executed by the Ottoman Turks. By looking backwards and remembering these atrocities, we are neither galvanizing hatred nor keeping ourselves in captivity of the past, but rather looking always positively forward to a future of peace, justice, cooperation, and all kinds of positive things, prosperity. As the psalmist says, righteousness and peace will kiss each other. Faithfulness will spring up from the ground, and righteousness will look down from the sky. For over a century, our forefathers, and many of us in our own lifetime too, have lived and marched through the valley of painful sorrow, expecting that the perpetrators and their descendants, realizing the scale of their inhuman acts, would acknowledge the severity of their crimes, apologize for them, and offer retribution. Unfortunately, instead of narrowing the abyss of misfortune, they have been widening it by denial of their audacious deeds and distorting history. Moreover, in the last couple of years, the world has been witnessing continuous death and annihilation threats by Turkey and its ally Azerbaijan against the Republic of Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, and Armenia. Amid this gloom and uncertainty, we are comforted, O Lord, that your providential care has never ceased to shower upon your children, the people of Mount Ararat, the hosting land of Noah's Ark. We are grateful, O Lord, for your Spirit, who has ever energized our dreams to walk from the death marches of Deir el-Zor to the land of the free and the home of the brave. We are thankful that you have shown your mercy through all statesmen and stateswomen who believe and are committed to ensuring that justice prevails. We believe that our cause is the cause of all minorities in the world who are silently suffering the scars of injustice, discrimination, and dictatorship. We will walk despite awful denials, distortions, and oppressions, for our patience is deeper than the oceans. Our aspirations are higher than the mountains. Our will and our commitment are as solid as granite. Our dream and goal are as pure as in yonder valley the myrtle breathes its fragrance into space, as the great poet, artist, and philosopher Gibran Khalil Gibran says. May we carry our yoke consciously and willingly for the ultimate victory of truth, justice, and peace. Amen.
Thank you, Your Eminence. At this moment, I would like to ask the Honorable Frank Malone to join us here. He is the founding co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on Armenian Issues. Sir, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And let me thank everyone for being here tonight. I know we do this every year, 108th commemoration of the Armenian Genocide, and certainly want to thank the two major Armenian organizations, the Armenian Assembly and the Armenian National Committee, for putting this together. It's, I think, indicative of the cooperation that the Armenian Caucus gets with other groups like the Hellenic Caucus, that we have our Hellenic friend here tonight as the MC. You know, we work together with the Armenian diaspora, Armenian Americans, if you will, to get members to join our caucus, and we work with some of the other caucuses in order to achieve our goals because of our common concerns. I want to first of all thank all of you for what you did to achieve recognition by the U.S. Congress of the Armenian Genocide a few years ago. That was not an easy task. We worked on it. I see Adam Schiff here, who was the sponsor of the resolution. Thank you, Adam. Over 20 years, Adam, that you and all of us in the caucus worked on it. Of course, Senator Menendez in the Senate as well, and of course the President. Right now for April 24th, which I guess is coming up this weekend, or for the commemoration, we have President Biden, of course, saying that, recognizing it as well, ever since he's been in office as well. So we've come a long way. I mean, I guess we could just kind of rest on our laurels and say, look, we're having a genocide commemoration, but both houses of Congress and the President have recognized the genocide, so why are we here? Well, we all know that the Armenian cause is a cause that we have to be constantly vigilant about, right? There's no rest, right? And particularly now I see Robert representing Artsakh. In many ways, in my opinion, and I'm sure many of you, that what we see happening in Artsakh, both with the attack, the aggression that took place a couple years ago, and the cutting off of the Lachin corridor, in my opinion, is nothing more a continuation of the genocide, right? We know the people in Artsakh are suffering, not having enough food, not having medical supplies. To me, that sounds like genocide, but we're not going to allow it to happen. But, I mean, it is the same phenomenon. And whether it's Azerbaijan or it's Turkey, it's this idea, of course, that the Armenians should not be recognized, that they should be, wiped out. Armenia is essentially Azerbaijan by insisting that there be a rail corridor between Yachivin and Artsakh across the southern part of Armenia. I was just praising you, my senator, I praised Adam Schiff for sponsoring the genocide resolution in the House, and you in the Senate. And I have to say, I'm so glad to see your lovely wife, who's of Armenian descent. We're very proud of that as well. But the bottom line is that we have to constantly be vigilant, and that's what our Armenian Caucus has done. We've made it quite clear to the State Department that the cutoff of the Lachin corridor is unacceptable. We've asked them to repeatedly speak out against it and even do more, if at all possible. And we're hoping that this constant pressure by the United States and the other Minsk group co-chairs will ultimately lead to reopening the corridor and ultimately lead to a reigniting, if you will, of negotiations to lead to Artsakh being recognized as an Armenian territory, either as its own nation or as part of Armenia, or in some capacity it has to remain Armenian. That's what we insist on. And then at the same time, we're working very hard to get humanitarian assistance and other assistance through the annual appropriations process to Armenia and to Artsakh. Last year we had a significant increase in aid. This year we're trying to do even more in terms of aid, and also saying that there shouldn't be any kind of military or assistance to Azerbaijan because we are fearful that it will ultimately help Azerbaijan in its aggressive efforts against Armenia and Artsakh. I'll just leave with this. I'm sure you're going to hear from my colleagues as well. That's why this meeting is even more important. I know we're primarily here to commemorate the genocide, but our work is never done, and part of what we have to do as members of Congress and as representatives of the Armenian diaspora is to continue this effort to make sure that our government is on the side of Armenia as Azerbaijan and Turkey continue this aggression and ultimately, in the case of Artsakh, another form of genocide. So thank you for being here. Thank you for all you do. Rest assured that what you do is crucial and makes a difference in educating members of Congress and the administration about what needs to be done to protect the country we love of Armenia and Artsakh. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. This time I'd like to have the senator from the great state of New Jersey come up here and address the crowd. So you don't need much of an introduction. All of us know you here. So please, the podium is yours.
Thank you very much. It's always good never to have an introduction. So let me, Your Eminence, Reverend clergy, my distinguished colleagues in the in the House. Appreciate very much the courtesy of being able to go. We have other events tonight, but I have never missed this event over the course of my congressional career, led originally by Congressman Pallone, who was part of the founding members of the Armenian Caucus, and when I came to the House, he was already serving and, proselytized me to the cause, and of course Adam Schiff, who is renowned for his advocacy for the Armenian community in the House of Representatives. My special thanks to the Armenian National Committee of America for organizing the event, the Armenian Assembly of America, which is co-hosting. This year's observance, which my wife and I are thrilled to be here. I'm glad to have my wife. She doesn't know I was here in Washington, but she was here. I said, so you have to come this year to the Armenian observance event. She lost her grandfather during the genocide, so it's a first-hand pain and observance of that reality. This year's observance, commemorating the 108th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide, comes only 2 years after the President of the United States, Joe Biden, finally spoke the truth about what happened to the Armenian people. When President Biden called it genocide for the first time, that was thanks to the dedication and commitment of everyone here and in other parts of the country, from our marches and convocations in Times Square, to the phone backs through Armenian church and civic groups, to the Armenian Assembly's conferences and seminars, to the millions of messages that Anka sent. You never gave up. And because of your effort, the world remembers the truth about the victims and survivors of the Armenian Genocide. We remember that nearly 108 years ago, in the waning years of the Ottoman Empire, Turkish authorities began a systematic campaign to exterminate the Armenian population through killings, starvation, forced deportation, and untold brutality. We remember the 1.5 million victims, not only for the way in which they died, we also reflect on the way in which they lived and what they meant. Their contributions to Armenian history and culture live on today, including so many who escaped the violence to make a new life here in the United States. Now, I am the child of Cuban refugees who fled violence and persecution to come to the United States. Today, I'm one of 100 senators and the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. That speaks not only to the promise of the American dream, it reflects the wisdom of our ancestors who sacrificed so much so that later generations could prosper. And indeed, around the world, that is true of the Armenian community. Armenian newspapers, Armenian radio stations, Armenian schools, Armenian churches, each reflecting the incredible success and resilience of the Armenian people. I never forget that movie that I watched with my wife about the genocide. And the final moments of that movie where the family is gathered together and they say, but we are here, we are here. Of course, as everyone here knows, despite these impressive achievements, as Congressman Pallone was just speaking about, we have a lot more work to do. Not only because the Turkish government continues to try and hide the truth about the Armenian genocide, prosecuting writers and historians, throwing them in jail, but because right now Azerbaijan is enforcing an illegal blockade of the Armenian people living in that area that we know as Artsakh. Azerbaijan's 2020 war has already uprooted close to 100,000 Armenians from their home in Nagorno-Karabakh. 6,500 people have died. Now Armenians there face an acute humanitarian crisis. There are energy shortages, medical shortages, food shortages, water shortages, and they face the threat of ethnic cleansing. In my view, the United States response has been unacceptable. That's why I've pushed for more humanitarian assistance to help the victims both in Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. That's why I'm proud to have gotten a commitment from Secretary Blinken when he came before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee at the budget hearing, committed to making sure more humanitarian assistance reaches Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. But incredibly, it's not just that the United States is failing, in my view, to meet these humanitarian needs. Our government is still sending security assistance to Azerbaijan. How on earth can the United States justify sending any kind of support, security or otherwise, to the regime in Baku. We've seen a video catching Azerbaijani forces killing unarmed Armenian soldiers in cold blood. We have reports of Azerbaijani soldiers sexually assaulting and mutilating an Armenian female soldier. It makes a mockery of the Freedom Support Act. Section 907 of that act is meant to ban security assistance to Azerbaijan until Azerbaijan is, quote, taking demonstrable steps to cease all blockades and other offensive uses of force against Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh, end quote. I don't know how anybody dispassionately who looks at the reality on the ground can suggest that that is what's happening, that they have ceased. And yet the State Department has waived Section 907 over again and again. That's why I asked Secretary Blinken during our hearing why his budget included international military and education training funds for a force that violates Armenia's sovereignty and represses its own people. Suffice it to say that I'm strongly opposed to having any aid go to a fighting force known for war crimes and aggression against a neighbor state. We should not be in bed with governments like Azerbaijan. It's inexcusable. It's morally repugnant. It's got to stop. So finally, let me say that we cannot untether our security assistance from human rights and American values just to focus on short-term military assistance or energy. It not only damages American national security interests, it flies in the face of our duty to honor the victims and survivors of the Armenian Genocide, and our duty to ensure that history does not repeat itself again. So let us use this moment to honor their legacy and struggle for survival in the past by standing up for the truth today. Let's hold those accountable who would commit genocide even if it takes a lifetime, because only with the truth can we confront our history, learn its lessons, and say with confidence the words, never, never again. Thank you very much for having
me. Senator, thank you for those inspiring words. Thank you for your work on these issues. Our next speaker is the co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on Armenian Issues, longtime congressional champion of Armenian issues, representing the 30th District of California, which is the largest Armenian American community in the United States. I'd like to welcome Congressman Schiff. Congressman, please.
Thank you very much, and my thanks to the ANC for hosting us today and for the Armenian Assembly in joining in this commemoration and inviting me to speak. Thank you to our fearless champion, Frank Pallone, for his many years of leadership of our caucus. He continually, along with Speaker Pelosi, organizes high-level discussions between members of our caucus and the administration, including the president, and we're grateful for your leadership. And Robert Avdisian, very nice to see you again. I was honored to have you as my guest for the State of the Union to highlight the importance of U.S. attention to what is going on in the region right now. And Ambassador Wilson, I want to thank you for your extraordinary courage and leadership. You are an inspiration to all of us. Reverend and honored clergy, ladies and gentlemen, we stand together to commemorate the 108th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide and honor the memory of those whose lives were lost. It was an honor and a deeply personal mission to help lead the efforts, along with my colleagues, to officially recognize the Armenian Genocide for over 20 years. I was enormously proud when that culminated in the passage in the House of a resolution honoring the Armenian Genocide, and to see like passage with Senator Menendez's leadership in the Senate. In President Biden's recognition in 2021, not long thereafter, the United States finally, at each level of government, ended its shameful silence about the Armenian Genocide. It is a victory for human rights, for the truth itself, and it's something that we all achieved together. The Ottoman Empire's slaughter of 1.5 million Armenians, men, women, and children, whose lives were taken too soon in the 20th century's first genocide, is a tragedy we must do more than pledge to never forget. We must ensure that it never occurs. Teachers, writers, businessmen, and doctors were rounded up and killed. Clergy were tortured and burned alive in churches. Infants ripped from their mothers' arms. Sons and daughters witnessed their parents being murdered, and children died gasping for a drop of water. Unthinkably, the danger to Armenians has not desisted. Armenians are still under attack today, including those who lost their lives in Artsakh, the many forced to flee from the unprovoked aggression of Azerbaijan and Turkey, Azerbaijan's unprovoked assaults on the sovereign territory of Armenia, and the thousands of Armenians who remain at risk of another genocide as Azerbaijan tries to drive them out of Artsakh and Armenia. Over the past few months, we've reached a critical point in the hostility of Azerbaijan towards Armenia and Artsakh. And I can tell you I've never been more concerned than I am today that Azerbaijan may intend another all-out war on Armenia and Artsakh. Azerbaijan's government has implemented a months-long inhumane blockade of the Lachin Corridor, the only route connecting Artsakh with resources and supplies from the outside world. As a result, 120,000 people don't have access to critical food, medicine, gas, electricity, even basic freedom. To make matters worse, Azerbaijan's President Aliyev has amassed forces along the border. Some of those forces have murdered Armenian officers unprovoked and continue to escalate tensions in the region. The warmonger Aliyev is threatening Armenians living in Artsakh, making it clear he's leaving them with no choice but to flee or face life-threatening conditions. We cannot allow violence and crimes against humanity to go unanswered, whether they occurred 108 years ago or as recently as this year, this month, or this week. We must stop U.S. support for the Aliyev regime and hold him accountable for war crimes. We must issue strong sanctions so that he will reopen the Lachin Corridor and release prisoners of war and civilians he has captured. And I urge the administration and Congress to support Artsakh's right of self-determination. We must do so much more. As we remember the innocent victims of the Armenian Genocide, we reflect on the resilience of those who survived and the perseverance of their children and grandchildren who built new lives in the United States, speak the beautiful Armenian language, and enrich our nation with the Armenian culture and heritage. Despite the trials of the Armenian people, which they have faced and continue to face, it has not broken their faith, determination, or will to survive. The Armenian people have overcome the most harsh of trials and tribulations and yet remain strong and unbowed in Armenia, in Artsakh, and around the world. Now more than ever, we must further strengthen and support Armenia and Artsakh. And thus, we must not rest until safety, peace, and justice are achieved for our Armenian brothers and sisters. I will always stand with Armenia, with Artsakh, and the Armenian community. I will always stand with you. And I'm very pleased to just acknowledge, and I will let others introduce, Speaker Pelosi. There has never been a stronger champion of the Armenian people in Congress. And I can tell you from the many conversations with the administration that she has organized how she has persevered in pressing the administration to continue to do more to protect the people of Armenia and Artsakh. And your historic visit is one that will always be remembered. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for your leadership, and thank you all for inviting me to speak today.
I would like to ask Congressman Katie Porter to come to the podium. She's a member of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform and an original co-sponsor of House Resolution 108, which calls for an end of U.S. military assistance to Azerbaijan. Congressman.
Thank you, everyone. Beginning 108 years ago this month, up to 1.5 million Armenians died. in the Armenian Genocide. And we gather tonight together to keep their memory alive. On April 24th, 1915, soldiers from the Ottoman Empire arrested and deported hundreds of Armenian intellectuals throughout Constantinople. This was done in an effort to deprive the community of its leadership for the devastation that was to come. In the 2 years that followed, the Armenians living throughout the Ottoman Empire were victims of death marches, the pillaging of their heritage, and other brutal atrocities. But they persisted. As a people, the Armenians showed unbelievable resilience in the face of persecution. And not only did they survive, they thrived. To this day, the world continues to benefit from the contributions of the Armenian people. My home state of California has the largest population of Armenians outside of Armenia, and my home university, where I was a professor, the University of California, Irvine, has an amazing program of Armenian studies as well as Armenian language. While we commemorate their perseverance, we must also recognize Armenians' ongoing fight to coexist peacefully. For the last several months, the ethnic Armenians of Artsakh have been the targets of cruelties at the hands of Azerbaijan. The region's 120,000 Armenians have been denied food, fuel, medicine, and other essential goods as a result of a cruel and inhumane blockade by the government of Azerbaijan. The goal is clear: to force the ethnic Armenians of Artsakh from their homeland by imposing conditions that make life impossible. Our response must also be clear. We must hold the Azerbaijan accountable for its aggression, and I will keep calling, and if needed, pushing the Biden administration to be proactive in taking steps to end this blockade. American taxpayers should not be subsidizing Azerbaijan's hostility against the Armenian people. As long as the aggression continues, Azerbaijan should not receive any military assistance. I am proud to be here tonight in solidarity and in memory with the Armenian people, to honor your past and to fight for your remarkable future. Thank you so much.
At this time, I would like to call Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi.
Yes.
Ma'am.
No, she's trying to speak, please.
Senator,
Of course, you're making the right call.
I think so. You've been a long-time friend of the Armenian American community, so please, Speaker, Madam Speaker, the podium is all yours.
Good evening. I actually was supposed to follow Senator Booker. I will stay and hear your remarks. Good evening, and thank you, Dean. Thank you to the Armenian National Committee of American and Armenian Assembly for organizing this commemoration ahead of next week's Armenian Genocide Remembrance Day. Let us salute Chairman Frank Pallone, co-chair with Jackie Spear and Eshu, all of our so many members of part of the Armenian Caucus on Armenian issues, many other congressional allies of Armenia here. And of course, it's a privilege to be with so many of my colleagues from California. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Katie, and so many others, some of whom I named, and which is proudly home to 40% of the American Armenian population. Oh, there you are, Frank. Last year, Speaker, it was my privilege to travel to Yerevan with Chairman Pallone, Representative Anna Eshu, and Jackie Spear. There we visited the Genocide Memorial, which was truly a life-changing experience. We there reached before the eternal flame, spoke the names of communities destroyed, walked among the memorial trees, learned of horrific truths at the Museum Institute. Doing so reaffirmed our fervent belief that the Ottoman Empire's monstrous crimes against humanity must never be erased. As we made clear by tonight's theme, preventing a second Armenian genocide, affirming this painful truth of history. And I thank all of you for your outside mobilization, your persistence in all of this to make sure that we were finally successful in getting this done at long last. Every president and candidate that we knew right, Frank? Right? You know Adam because we've been through this again and again, said they supported the designation of Armenian genocide until they became president. I remember President Bush saying to me, I know, you're going to show me my letter. I said, you know, I'm going to show you your letter, in which you declared Armenian genocide, but again, when he became president, that was not the case. Now we in Congress remain focused on Azerbaijan's use of force in Nagorno-Karabakh, which threatens to drag the region in dark and deadly paths. And thank you, Mr. Schiff, for your persistence in calling for the end of the support, the funds going there. And as Katie Poore mentioned too, and so many others, we want an answer as to what those funds are for and why they are going there. Money being fungible, you may think they're for one purpose, right, Frank? How many times have we had this conversation with the administration since the trip? I know Mr. Schiff was in his Armenian community when we were in Armenia, but he is on the phone with us every time when we have our briefings, and we're about to get a classified briefing on all this. There must be a negotiated, comprehensive, and lasting settlement to this conflict so that we can pave a way to peace and security. Make no mistake, support for the Armenian people transcends partisanship in politics. This is very bipartisan. And America will be there as Armenia holds down an important front in the battle of democracy versus autocracy. We saw that when we were there. As the great Armenian poet, Parikh Sabak wrote so beautifully about his home country, what miracle made you not be extinguished as others before had done? The flame never went off, but through long centuries kept on burning. Let us pledge to preserve the miracle of Armenia, whose flame of freedom has kept on burning, now, of course, in Armenia, but in America, with so many Armenian Americans, being a resource to our country and a bridge to Armenia. Thank you all for what you did and are doing to make sure we keep Armenia safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Now I'd like to call the senator from the great state of New Jersey. You better have a good speech, sir.
You all have had so many tremendous people. I know you've had Bob Menendez, you've had Nancy Pelosi, I feel like Harvard, Yale, and now you've got at least Rutgers here to come up from behind and speak. I see there's some Jersey love here. Look, I am humbled and honored to be standing before you right now. This is an extraordinary community of people. Not only do we have Armenian Americans here, we have Congress people from all different backgrounds coming in solidarity to mark this moment. We know this is the 108th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide. And we know that we have an American government who is making sure to speak truth about the Armenian Genocide because of the activism of groups like ANCA, because of the activism of American citizens of Armenian descent, because of the activism of Congress people who are committed to the cause. Your persistence, your unyielding, indefatigable pursuit of justice is an acknowledgement that you all understand that the opposite of love is not hate, it is silence, it is indifference, it is allowing lies to persist. We know the terrible truth of the Armenian Genocide, and we have to continue to tell that truth, not just from the halls of our government institutions, but as a part of the larger story of humanity telling its truth. This is how we ensure such genocides never happen again. And so you all know Congress passed a resolution in 2019 affirming the truth. You all know that President Biden did his part by righting a historical wrong, by being a president of the most powerful nation in the land and acknowledging this horrific genocide. So I'm here with my colleagues today, honored to be a part of this overdue effort to make sure that the United States of America is on the right side of history. I also tell you as a guy from Jersey, who comes from the black community, that you all are giving a testimony to the truth, that we can bend the arc of the moral universe more towards justice. And as we speak of justice, we must speak of what is going on in Azerbaijan and their inhuman blockade of a humanitarian corridor towards Artsakh, and make sure that we do not remain silent in the face of this humanitarian tragedy. I share your concerns for the humanitarian plight of communities that right now are at risk, and I will continue to do everything in the United States Senate in partnership with people like Senator Menendez and in partnership with some great Jersey boys. Thank you very much, Josh Gottheimer, Chairman Pallone. If you're gonna acknowledge your Californians, I got to give my Jersey people some props. You've got, in these two congressmen, you've got the Bon Jovi, Bruce Springsteen combination of New Jersey. But we are united in our commitment to Armenian sovereignty. We're united in our commitment to humanitarian rights, and we're going to continue to do everything we can to avoid a humanitarian crisis. Now more than ever, we have to acknowledge our shared responsibility. Now more than ever, we have to call out violence against innocent people in all shapes and forms. And I want to say thank you, because the work cannot stop. The efforts for justice can never yield. We must continue to make sure that we stand together to make sure that peace and love and justice reign supreme. Thank you, everyone.
Senator, you did not disappoint. Thank you. At this time, I would like to ask the Honorable Grace Meng, who is the Congresswoman from New York's 6th District, and also sits on the Appropriations Subcommittee on Foreign Aid, and recently facilitated the evacuation of constituents from behind Azerbaijan's blockade of Artsakh. Congresswoman, please. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am not a senator, I'm not from New Jersey, I'm not the speaker, but we do have a street named in the heart of my district, officially by the city of New York, named Armenia Way. So if anyone ever is in Queens, please come visit. I'm Congresswoman Grace Meng, and it is so great to be here with so many friends and many fellow New Yorkers. Any New Yorkers here? Yay, so quiet from New York today. But so honored to be here with so many to commemorate the solemn 108th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide. It is our responsibility to recognize the massacre of 1.5 million Armenians 107 years ago. The Armenian Genocide is an important reminder that crimes against humanity must not go without recognition and condemnation. By commemorating the Armenian Genocide, we pay tribute to the perseverance and determination of those who survived. As a member of the Armenian Caucus, I have consistently supported resolutions sponsored by my colleagues in the caucus in recognition of the Armenian Genocide, which makes it the policy of the United States to commemorate the Armenian Genocide every single year. As part of these remembrance efforts, I am proud to be a co-sponsor of the Armenian Genocide Education Act, which would promote greater public awareness and understanding of the history, lessons, consequences, and ongoing costs of the Armenian Genocide. Not only do we need to remember the past, but we must recognize the ongoing tragedies right in front of us. The blockade of Artsakh is simply unacceptable. Families and their lives have been turned upside down. I know many of you in this room have family, friends, and loved ones in Artsakh who continue to be impacted by Azerbaijan's hateful policies. Please know that I and my colleagues stand with you in calling for the end to this unjust blockade. I am fortunate to have recently helped 2 of my constituents successfully return to Queens, New York after finding themselves trapped behind Aliyev's blockade. But I know that there are thousands more people for whom leaving Artsakh is not an option. Thank you so much for your advocacy, and thank you for inviting me here to speak today.
Thank you, Congresswoman. With all this love for California, for New Jersey, and even New York, I think as a son of Illinois, I think I should show some love to the congressman from Illinois, Brad Schneider, who sits on the Foreign Affairs Committee and is an original co-sponsor of House Resolution 108. Congressman.
Good evening. It is always a privilege to be here and to be with friends and colleagues, and especially people from Illinois. So thank you. I am proud to be a member of the Armenian Caucus. We have a close-knit group of people. And last week we marked the 108th anniversary of the beginning of the genocide in 1915. Yesterday we actually marked Yom HaShoah, the genocide in World War II at the hands of the Nazis. Earlier today, a hearing, themselves, or if not repeating, they rhyme. And we see that even today in Armenia. As a member of the Holocaust Museum Memorial Council and on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, I feel a hyper sense of responsibility. As Senator Booker said, we have to speak the truth. We have to acknowledge what happened. And that's why I was so proud in the 116th Congress to sponsor the resolution recognizing the extermination of 1.5 Armenians, finally giving full recognition of what happened a century ago. And I was pleased that at this time 2 years ago, President Biden formally recognized genocide. Today, the U.S. has I would argue, extremely important role to play in the South Caucasus region. And we've talked about, in my office with my friends at home, Azerbaijan's aggressive policy towards Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh and the disregard for people. My colleague Adam Smith talked about his grave concern with threat for war. As we stay here, as we gather here, we're at the 4-month mark of Azerbaijan's illegal blockade of the Lashin corridor, the sole entry point from Armenia to Artsakh. The blockade has resulted in a severe humanitarian crisis with shortages of critical supplies such as food, medical equipment, as well as intermittent energy and internet service for the residents of Artsakh. That's why it's so important that we speak out, and why I joined with my colleagues in condemning Azerbaijan's blockade and calling for using every tool available to bring it to an end. Yet despite our calls and an order from the International Court of Justice to take all measures, the blockade continues and the residents of Artsakh continue to suffer. We cannot and we will not sit idly by. That's why it's important that you are here today. That's why it's important that we gather together. The members of the Armenian Caucus in Congress stand together and say that we must protect the people of Artsakh and must free the people of Armenia. My colleagues have said it before, I'll say it again, and you're going to hear it from the others who go after me. We are with you, we are together. Democrats, Republicans, Americans with Armenians. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman. Before I introduce our next speaker, I would like to acknowledge the Congressman Kevin Mullen and Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, who are both here who stopped by to lend their support. I would like a round of applause for them. Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is the Honorable Brad Sherman from California's 32nd Congressional District. He is a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and a longtime friend of the Armenian American community, and an original co-author of the House Resolution 108. Congressman.
Hello, I'm Brad Sherman from California's best named city, Sherman Oaks. With me here from my staff is Nareg Achayan, and for 26 years I've served on the Foreign Affairs Committee. For 26 years I've been a member of the Armenian Caucus. Just yesterday we commemorated Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust. And we were taught that to forget the name of a victim is as if to kill them again. Well, Turkey had a demand that we deny the name of 1.5 million victims of the first genocide of the 20th century. We now must remember them, because genocide denial is not just the last step of the genocide. First you expunge a people and then you try to expunge the memory of the expungement. But genocide denial is the first step in the next genocide. And that's why Adolf Hitler was able to tell those around him who wondered whether they could get away with it, who today remembers the Armenians? We here do today in 2023. And we remember the genocide even though Turkey asks us not to. They say that we shouldn't pass that resolution because it would hurt our relationship with this valuable strategic ally. What kind of relationship could we have with a Germany that demanded that we forget the Holocaust? Turkey will not be a democratic country until it stops denying the past of the Ottoman Empire. Today, the survivors of that genocide are besieged in Artsakh. And I know it looks dark, but we should draw some solace from our experience in fighting to get Congress to remember the genocide. For decade after decade, I was here with many of you fighting, and it looked bad. Year after year would go by, and we didn't pass the resolution. Then we did. And the next year the Senate did, and thereafter we have President Biden acknowledging the genocide. And so while 115,000 or more Armenians are besieged, we reflect on the fact that the blockade is the tactic. The effect of the blockade is human deprivation. The goal of the blockade is to ethnically cleanse Artsakh. And the result of the blockade will be failure. Because the Armenians who have lived there for over 1,000 years aren't going anywhere. So that's why I've joined colleagues in demanding that we look at sanctions on Azerbaijan, starting with enforcing, of course, Section 209 and completely eliminating any aid to Azerbaijan. We've got a lot to do. They said we couldn't pass the resolution, and we did. They said they can drive the people of Armenia, the Armenians, from Artsakh. We'll prove them wrong again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is the Honorable Congresswoman Young Kim from the 40th District of California. She chairs the House Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Indo-Pacific. Congresswoman, the podium is yours.
Thank you very much for being here, and thank you very much for welcoming me.
I want to welcome the members of the Armenian Assembly of America and Armenian National Committee of America. I want to thank you for hosting this event to honor the victims of the Armenian Genocide, but also the victims of the Greek and Assyrian Genocide. You know, I represent a district that is more in South Orange County, but up until last year, I represented 39 congressional districts. And that district was represented by former chairman Ed Royce, who was a champion of this issue and friend of the Armenian American community. And I'm delighted to carry on the legacy and the leadership. His chairman, Royce, was someone that I worked for over 2 decades. So trust me when I say I understand the issues of the Armenian American community. I do, because I worked on that issue. You know, so during my time and when I worked for him, I worked with our local Armenian American constituency to try to work and push for recognition of these tragic acts. And when I left his office to work as a member of the elected state assembly in Sacramento, I consistently supported the Armenian Genocide Resolution at the state level. And now, as your elected member of Congress from California, it is critical, and I'm delighted and honored to be able to carry on that work, not only to remember these acts against humanity, but also to educate our next generation about this history. That's why I am proud to co-sponsor the Armenian Genocide Act in the 117th Congress, and I look forward to continuing to work with my colleagues to advocate for the Armenian American community, for the Armenian community, and whether it is for the genocide recognition, or lifting the blockade, or attending local community events, who I have a lot of friends in the Armenian American community, I'm proud to continue to be an advocate for you. So please consider me as one of your strongest friends and advocate here, working on your behalf, being your voice. So thank you so much for having me, and thank you very much for being here.
I would like to ask Congressman Jim Costa, who is a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and a longtime friend of the Armenian American community, representing Fresno, home to one of the first Armenian communities in the United States. Congressman, pleasure to have you.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
It's my honor always to be here with my friends of the Armenian community as we commemorate the 108th anniversary of the first genocide that took place in the 20th century. And I like to say, and many of you have heard me say it before, my name is Aram, and I come from the land of Williams Arroyo. With fondness and deep appreciation and a great deal of pride. The Armenian diaspora obviously found its way into so many parts of our country and the world. But the heart and the soul of that diaspora in the San Joaquin Valley in Fresno is well beloved. And so for those of us who grew up there, myself, the Khazarians and the Abrahamians and the Galicians, I learned as a small young lad that the story that Amos Kaligian told me of the genocide as a 10-year-old. And I say that because we should never ever forget. We see such crimes of war being committed as we speak in Ukraine, where President Putin, in my view, has established himself as the 21st century version of a war criminal. I need you to pull this up because I want to share a story with you. Last Thursday, I was at a book signing ceremony, and I want to read you the excerpts of the book. The book is called The Honey Jar. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. It's a children's book. It's based on a true story of the Armenian Genocide for a boy left behind during the flight and must return to find his sister. In 1920, the 8-year-old Bedros fled Armenia with his young sisters, grandmother and uncle, to escape the Turkish soldiers invading their town. But in the confusion, Bedros lost his sight of the adults and was left alone to protect his siblings. Hungry and cold and overwhelmed in responsibility, Bedros failed to remember his promise to his mother. This book is told in verse and suspenseful and heart-rending. The honey jar depicts a journey from desperation to freedom anchored in Bedros' promise to return to his native land and find the one he left behind, his sister. He was 8 years old, his sister was 2. In 1963, he decided to go back to Armenia. His father told him, look for your sister. If you find your sister and she's no longer alive, bring some of the dirt from her gravesite, so I shall have. And maybe, who knows, you'll find her alive. He went in 1963 and found his sister. And this is what the book is all about. The rejoining of family, a brother and sister. And I recommend that you get the book. It's written by an author in Fresno, Joan Shepard, The Honey Jar. And it's a great way to educate young people about this horrific event in the 20th century. Obviously, the broad support that you have engendered is reflected in the support you see this evening. The focus on finally recognizing officially by the United States Congress and signed by the President of the United States that in fact the genocide is recognized officially by the United States government. But obviously with the situation in Artsakh today, more work needs to be done. Once again, Azerbaijan is demonstrating its disregard for its respect of a sovereign nation and a people that they are neighbors with. And the world is watching. We certainly cannot believe, I cannot believe, that Russia will be an honest broker in this circumstance. They've proven they are not. And therefore it's incumbent upon the rest of us to hold Azerbaijan accountable, as we must hold Turkey accountable. Obviously the resolution H108 that we're all supporting on these human rights violations is critical. But your advocacy, your presence here, your involvement makes a difference. It makes a difference, and that's why it is so important that you continue this participation. For the clergy, for the distinguished guests that are here, you all know what you feel from your heart. Never again means never again. So, as a proud Valley resident, graduate of Fresno State, home of Roger Tatarian, so many other distinguished Armenian families, the only university in America that has a memorial dedicated to the Armenian Genocide. It's important that we never, never forget. Thank you for all of your good work. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of the Armenian Caucus. And get the Honey Jar. It's a good book.
Thank you, Congressman. In fact, you are right. Thank you for sharing that story, because never forgetting means sharing those stories and making sure we never forget. Our next speaker is a member of the House Judiciary Committee and an original co-sponsor of the House Resolution 108, Congressman Swalwell.
When Jim Costa says that he represents the only university that has a memorial to the Armenian Genocide, I take that as a challenge. And I'm going to go back to our universities in my district and tell them, we better match what Jim Costa's district did. So I will report to you next year the progress that we've made to make sure, as Jim said, we never forget. When this resolution was first brought to me, when I was a younger member of Congress, I went to my mentor, who was my high school teacher and someone in the community that I respected, and I told him, I said, there's this bill, this legislation on the Armenian Genocide, and I'm getting a lot of constituents asking me to sponsor it, and a lot of constituents who you know who are asking me to not. And I said, like, you were a history teacher, can you help me sort this out? And he said to me, he said, Eric, this absolutely happened. There's no dispute about the facts. And if you don't sponsor this and we don't recognize this, I'm afraid that the next generation will never know it happened. And that's why the work that you did over the last 10 plus years is so important. You worked and you never stopped believing that leaders in Congress from both parties would understand that this had to be recognized and held up as something that could never happen again. And you did it. And it passed on a bipartisan vote, signed into law. And 100 years later, after the last year of that genocide, we are now making sure that the next generation, my children, my 5-year-old, my 4-year-old, my 1-year-old, they will learn about this in their classrooms, and they will be more enriched and better educated to make sure that it never happens again. And if that was all you did, that would be enough. But here you are as a community, standing up for the Uyghurs and the abuses taking place in China, and the Ukrainian people and the abuses taking place at the hands of the Russians. You recognize that never again doesn't only mean never again to your own people, it means never again to any person who walks this earth. Thank you. Thank you for your advocacy to make sure that's the case. And you have in me someone who will also be a fierce advocate to make sure that the atrocities being committed by Azerbaijan are not ever endorsed by the US government and are always condemned. And so I'm here today because America stands with Armenia, because Armenia, always with its values, stands with America. Thank you so much. Lots of work to do, but lots of work that you've already done to celebrate. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next speaker is the ranking member of the House Democracy Partnership, member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, representing Nevada's 1st District. And as a Greek American myself, I am proud to introduce the Honorable Dina Titus.
Well, Efkadi Stowe for that very nice introduction. His Eminence, an honored guest from the Armenian community, thank you for being here on campus to help tell the story, look people in the eye, show your presence, make them known that you are here and you mean business. Because Zoom was okay during COVID, but there's nothing like meeting in person, and that's why this is so nice. I'm so glad to be here. My university, my district's in the heart of Las Vegas, includes the Las Vegas Strip and UNLV. Now we don't have a monument commemorating the genocide, but we do have a statue of Coach Tarkanian, so hey, that counts for something. You know, you heard that I'm Greek, my mother is Greek, and so as I look at my friends in the Armenian community, we share many things. Our food is very similar, sometimes our music, our culture, and we also have a common enemy in Turkey, and so that binds us very close together, and we don't ever forget that. You know, I do serve on the House Democracy Partnership and have been to Armenia. It is one of those new kind of blossoming democracies that we need to encourage from this country, and exchanges between our legislative bodies help to build those bonds, and so I'm pleased to do that. You are a great neighbor in a very difficult neighborhood. You are a long-distance neighbor and supporter and friend of the United States, but you are surrounded oftentimes by enemies. I was pleased several years ago when it was brought to my attention that in the Library of Congress, the genocide was misnamed. I think all the books just called it the Armenian Massacre. So we led a letter to the Librarian of Congress to say this is incorrect, change that. And it took a little while, but they have done that. And so now our Library of Congress recognizes the Armenian Genocide and no longer refers to it as just a massacre. And as Eric said, how nice we have a president who also said, President Biden, that there was genocide and signed the Armenian Genocide Memorial Day resolution. You know, also in my district, besides UNLV, is the St. Garbide Church, and also the memorial that's in a park in my district to the genocide, or the people who we lost in the genocide. We gather there every year to lay flowers, and we wear a little pin that's a forget-me-not. Some of you probably have such a pin, and we pledge that we will not forget when we wear that flower, and we mean that for every year. Things, unfortunately, although we've made some gains, we've sent resolutions, we've changed the language, we've recognized the community to a greater extent, but now we have additional problems. Of course, it never seems to end as we deal with the boycott for resources and humane equipment and supplies in Artsakh by Azerbaijan. On the Foreign Affairs Committee, we have taken the position that we won't tolerate that, we won't support it, we call for a ceasefire, call for a safe passageway for these resources, and we'll continue to do that. So you can always count on me, because I don't feel like we're friends, I feel more like we're family. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Our next speaker is the Congresswoman from Virginia 7th District, member of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and an original co-sponsor of House Resolution 108, Abigail Spanberger. You are here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me at this important event, and hello to all of the Virginians who are here. Tonight we honor, thank you, Virginia, and the Armenian American community in Virginia. Tonight we honor the lives of 1.5 million victims of the Armenian Genocide at the hands of Ottoman Turkey, and we recognize the continued ethnic violence and hatred against the Armenian community. I represent Virginians who care deeply about their history, their loved ones, their ancestors, their forefathers who were lost or who survived, and importantly, the future of the Armenian people. The violence in Nagorno-Karabakh continues today on the 129th day of the blockade, and the roughly 120,000 civilians living through this blockade in Artsakh continue to experience food and water shortages and a severe lack of medical supplies, electricity, and other daily essentials. This is a man-made crisis created by the Azerbaijani government. It is unjust, it is unconscionable, and the current international strategy to open the corridor has proven to be ineffective. I am appreciative and awed by the continued commitment and advocacy that we see from Virginia's Armenian American community and from the country's Armenian community. The advocacy on behalf of their brothers and sisters who are suffering. I look forward to continuing my support for the victims of this crisis and my support for efforts to always remember the challenges that the Armenian people have faced throughout the world. Those challenges continue, we remember the hardships, and we pledge that for each generation and the children to come, it gets easier. Thank you so much for having me this evening. Thank you for having me be a part of this remembrance, and I will continue doing advocacy on behalf of community members who are currently suffering. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next speaker is the Congressman representing New York 17th Congressional District, member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and an original co-sponsor of House Resolution 108, Congressman Michael Long.
Good evening. It's great to be here with all of you. Soon I will be part of the Armenian family. Some of you may know Ken and Rich Sarajian, who've been heavily involved over the years with the Armenian National Committee of America. Ken's daughter Ani is marrying my cousin later this summer, so I look forward to the Armenian wedding that we're going to be enjoying. So it's great to be here with all of you tonight, and we gather here to remember the Armenian Genocide of 1915, a tragedy that claimed the lives of over 1 million innocent Armenians at the hands of the Ottoman Empire. And we take a moment to pay tribute to the victims and their families, and to honor their memory and the resilience of the Armenian people. On behalf of all of us, all of my colleagues in Congress, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to the Armenian National Committee of America for organizing this ceremony, which provides us with an opportunity to come together and remember one of the darkest chapters in human history. As we remember the Armenian Genocide, we must also acknowledge the conflict over Artsakh. Most recently in this chapter, Azerbaijan launched a blockade around Artsakh. This blockade is causing immense suffering to the Armenian people living there, and is a violation of their human rights. And we must work towards ending this blockade and ensuring that Artsakh has access to necessary resources like food and medicine. As we stand here today, we not only remember the past, but also support the present and the future of the Armenian people. We recognize the contribution of the Armenian community to the world and here in the United States, including their rich cultural heritage and their significant scientific and technological advancements. Let us continue to work together to promote human rights, peace, and justice, and let us never forget the victims of the Armenian Genocide. Once again, I want to thank the Armenian National Committee of America for bringing all of us together today to honor their memory and the resilience of the Armenian people. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next speaker is a congressional champion of the Armenian people and one of the few members of Congress who actually have visited Artsakh. I would like to introduce the Honorable Congresswoman Judy Chu.
Hello, I'm Congressmember Judy Chu from California's 28th District, which includes the nation's oldest Armenian American community in Pasadena. I'm honored to join with Armenians here in the U.S. Capitol and around the world to commemorate the lives of the more than 1.5 million victims of the Armenian Genocide. This genocide at the hands of the Ottoman Empire through executions, forced marches, starvation, and atrocities is a historical fact. Even America's own ambassador at the time, Henry Morgenthau, recorded what he called the murder of a nation. Of course, there are those who want to erase history and deny reality by claiming this genocide never happened, brushing it aside or whitewashing it just as the price of war. We cannot allow this to take hold, which is why for years I co-sponsored the House resolution to recognize the Armenian Genocide, which we finally passed in October of 2019. But our work is not finished, and we need to ensure Americans learn about and understand this atrocity so it can never happen again. We also need to stand up for Armenia and Artsakh today so that history cannot repeat itself. I am proud to be one of the only members of Congress to visit both Armenia and Artsakh. And I saw for myself what a beautiful place Artsakh was. But I do have to tell you that Azerbaijan warned me not to go, so when I came back, they banned me from the country. Yeah. And it's a badge of honor, yes. And it actually strengthened my resolve to stop Azerbaijan's continued aggression and their illegal blockade of Artsakh. It made me even more determined to stand by the people of Armenia and Artsakh as they struggle for their right to self-determination. So thank you for inviting me tonight, and I join with you to commemorate the victims of the Armenian Genocide. As we recognize the reality of what happened, we can honor those we lost and help ensure that it never happens again.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you for your support. Our next speaker is the Honorable Seth Magaziner. He is a member of the Committee on Homeland Security and the original co-sponsor of House Resolution 108. Representing
Good evening, everybody. My name is Seth Magaziner. I'm a brand new member of Congress from Rhode Island, where we are proud to have a strong and vibrant Armenian community. 108 years after the Armenian Genocide, we honor the memory of the 1.5 million martyrs who were systematically murdered by the Turks. We must not let history repeat itself, and we must stand with the Armenian people against renewed aggression from Azerbaijan. As we speak today, 120,000 Armenians are trapped, cut off from food, medicine, and fuel, part of Azerbaijan's long-standing campaign of aggression. Together with my colleagues from the Congressional Armenian Caucus, we have requested $50 million of funding for rebuilding and resettling efforts, including food, energy, security, internet access, maternal health care, and water. We have requested restriction of military assistance to Azerbaijan, urging Azerbaijan to free Armenian prisoners of war. The blockade of Artsakh must end, and it must end now. I am here today in solidarity with the Armenian community, which has demonstrated time and time again incredible resilience and strength in the face of persecution. I am proud to represent a part of the Armenian diaspora that has settled in Rhode Island and made tremendous contributions to our state. And I reaffirm my commitment and the commitment of my colleagues to ensuring that the United States and Armenia, as free, democratic, and peaceful nations, stand together now and forever. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Congressman. Our next speaker is the Congressman from California's 22nd District, co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on Armenian Issues, and also someone to have visited Artsakh. Thank you, Congressman.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Congressman David Valadao. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Armenian Caucus. Thank you for having me this evening. Today we're here to honor the lives of 1.5 million Armenians who were murdered or displaced by the Ottoman Empire from 1915 to 1923. The pain of the Armenian Genocide is deep. Many Armenians who were forced from their homes and fled to the United States and created a proud and vibrant American Armenian community. As Americans, we have a responsibility to acknowledge the devastation felt by these families. Today, we remember the men, women, and children whose lives were either lost or forever changed by this tragedy. This occasion is also an important time to condemn the ongoing aggression from Azerbaijan towards the Armenian people of Artsakh. These actions are in direct violation of international agreements and are preventing the deliveries of food, medicine, and other basic necessities, and a blatant violation of human rights. I will continue to be a strong supporter of the Armenian community in Congress. When I had the opportunity a number of years ago to go personally visit, I remember it when I decided to make the trip, I got a lot of pushback from sometimes our own government. And it was an interesting experience to go there and see for myself these people that have fought for themselves, have defended their nation, and did everything they possibly could to be a free society. And to see the situation that they're dealing with today is honestly devastating. And it's something that I know across the aisle, both Democrat and Republican, we're going to continue to fight to work to resolve this as quickly as we possibly can. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. We're going to continue to stand with you and look for ways to continue to be a strong voice for you in Congress. So thank you all very much for having me today.
Thank you, Congressman Valadao. I would at this time like to ask the permanent representative of the Republic of Artsakh to the United States to take the podium, Robert Avedizian.
Ambassador Evans, representatives of the partner organizations, Aram Bryan, the families of the ANC and Armenian Assembly, supporters, I'm extremely glad that we have once again gathered. And of course, our respect goes, I'm sure I can speak on behalf of the entire audience, to all the members who have demonstrated their support and have sent the wonderful messages. It is indeed extremely important and inspiring to see that we Armenians and our cause continues to enjoy this kind of support on the Hill. We have gathered here to commemorate the lives of our compatriots who died in the Armenian Genocide. I think that there is an additional importance to today's event, and you can pick it even from reading the title on the invitation, at least the one which has been sent to the Armenians, Preventing the Second Armenian Genocide. There is an absolutely different level of urgency of the efforts, be it on the Hill or in the executive, your efforts by our partner organizations, by our embassy, I'm sorry, I should recognize it. There is a different sense of urgency, there is a different level, and much more is at stake every day and every hour as we live our lives. Armenia and Artsakh are living through very difficult times. The blockade is still on. As there is hope that the pressure will ease, they disregard the calls from the US Congress, from major democracies around the globe, from the White House, from the State Department, from the International Court of Justice. They disregard it. They continue pushing their agenda of Armenizing Artsakh. Moreover, they continue their aggressive expansion. They attack Armenia proper. They disrupt the normal life of tens of communities along the line of contact between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Normal people cannot do agricultural jobs. They are cut off the access to water. They are cut to basic normal life, the access to normal conditions for a daily life, because Aliyev doesn't want it. Today we've heard a lot of thank yous from the congressman, to you, to organizations, to individuals, to our church. But I think it is us who have to say thank you to our supporters on the Hill for the decades of their activities towards stronger Artsakh, safer Armenia, more prosperous Armenia and Artsakh, stronger Armenian community. It is us who have to say thank you for their continued effort to make our way of life doesn't lose to attempts of autocracy, neighboring autocracy, to suppress it. We often hear that there is an historic opportunity. When people talk about, especially politicians, when they talk about the developments in the region, they speak about historic opportunity. Historic opportunity for what? For peace? There are different ways to achieve peace. It is clear for us in Artsakh and increasingly in Armenia that there is a historic opportunity to de-Armenize Artsakh, to take control and eventually modify or destroy the first Armenian school, to take control, cut the cross, transform our millennial-old churches. Yes, there is an historic opportunity for Erdogan to do what he promised to do in 2020 when they paired up with Azerbaijan in international terrorism and attacked Artsakh. there's an historic opportunity for them, what they call, to finish the deal and mission of their forefathers in the Caucasus. The blockade continues. The threats continue. The attempt of ethnic cleansing continues. So should our struggle. And again, having in mind the increased importance, the increased effectiveness, let's look for new ways. Let's capitalize on what works. Let's revive what doesn't work. Let's not be tired. Let's not give up. And hopefully, with the steadfast and continued support here from the Hill, in the executive, in everyone, as a person, as a group, as an organization, who supports freedom, justice, and liberty and democracy, we will succeed in saving Artsakh, in protecting Armenia's borders, and putting the aggressor in his place. There were two misconceptions when Azeris were initiating the blockade against us. One was from our side, we have to admit it. We really hope that in the 21st century, a tyranny, a consistently repressive government cannot succeed in its attempt to suffocate, cut food supply, prevent kids from going to school for 120,000 people. Armenian, but just imagine 120,000 people. The second misconception was from Azerbaijanis, from Aliyev. He thought that Artsakh will give up easy. He thought that if he cuts our bread, if he cuts the electricity, if he threatens, Artsakh will cross the red lines and succumb to that pressure. And at least in my conversations with many of our friends and supporters, and those with whom we meet for the first time, many folks continue to say, how come you guys are still there? People are astonished, they're surprised that Artsakh still exists, that Artsakh still pushes its agenda, that Artsakh still hopes that the world will join their efforts with us in a more steadfast, in a more revised, in a more effective way, lift the blockade and restore our fundamental freedoms. And we try to explain it by the principle that those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. This is not my words. This is not the words of an Armenian. These are words by Benjamin Franklin when he was fighting for the freedom and democracy of this very country. We in Artsakh realize and share this principle. We firmly believe that these words have proven their relevance through centuries and remain more than relevant today. So let us continue our struggle and to demonstrate to ourselves, to the aggressors, and to the world that Armenians deserve both liberty and safety. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for your words and also for your work here in Washington. Our next speaker is Dr. Michael Rubin. He is a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, where he specializes in Iran, Turkey, and the broader Middle East. He is a former Pentagon official and has written extensively on Azerbaijan and its enduring aggression against Armenia. If you haven't read Dr. Rubin, you're missing out. His analysis is spot on.
Thank you so much. I stand here actually in awe of the Armenian community and what ANCA and the Armenian Assembly have put together. I say this as an American Jew who has begun teaching my 11-year-old daughter about the Holocaust. The fact of the matter, as we've heard, is that while the Holocaust now is at a point where the last survivors are starting to die out, the Armenian community, and this gathering right here, provide an education in how to keep that memory alive so that history doesn't repeat. And make no mistake, history will repeat if it's allowed to. When I went to Artsakh, one of the epiphanies I had that I didn't hear in Washington with regard to the crisis is that Azerbaijan launched its surprise attack on Artsakh on the 100th anniversary of the invasion of newly independent Armenia. That wasn't a coincidence, that was deliberate. Now, as a historian, I tend to sometimes get down into the weeds, and as a former policy person and analyst, especially at the Pentagon, I can attest that especially in the executive branch, the United States State Department and the Defense Department can be very, very good at counting trees without ever seeing the forest. The forest in this case is the truth. Now, we've heard a lot about the success with regard to the genocide resolutions, the Armenian Genocide resolutions in the House of Representatives, in the Senate. Let's not also forget that with Mississippi's inclusion this past year, we now have all 50 states which have passed resolutions. The reason I bring this up is because we keep hearing, and certainly I was guilty of this too when I was a Pentagon official, we always hear that if these resolutions passed, that there would be severe ramifications with regard to Turkey's reaction and actions in NATO, in the United States, and so forth. What we learned is that truth matters and Turkey is a paper tiger. The fact of the matter is, when truth is spoken, there is no spin possible. There is no legitimate reaction. Turkey realizes it's not on solid ground, and not only has the United States and President Joe Biden now set an example, but many other countries in the world have as well, in a way that shows that Turkey is going to have to face history sooner rather than later. One other issue that concerns me, however, when I look specifically at Azerbaijan, and as an outsider to the political process, it astounds me that we don't realize how Azerbaijan is trying to humiliate the United States and specifically the policy community. Section 907 and the waiver of Section 907 is ingrained in law. To make excuses inside the State Department is an affront not to Democrats, not to Republicans, but to the entire Congress. This is about respect for Congress, respect for the law. If anyone wants to traffic military equipment to Azerbaijan, when President Aliyev makes very clear in his statements, including his statement yesterday, that he intends to effect population transfer, ethnic cleansing, and so forth, let that congressman or senator stand up and say that we need to sell weaponry to Azerbaijan despite what we see is a looming resumption of genocide. The same thing is true with the Foreign Agents Registration Act. It's a deliberate humiliation, and through the projection of the way Baku works, what they are doing is trying to impose the same corruption on Washington until the Justice Department gets serious about enforcing FARA. This humiliation is going to continue, and it's only going to encourage people like Ilham Aliyev to believe that they can achieve through caviar diplomacy what they can't achieve through truth. As a historian, one thing that concerns me, one issue that concerns me as I look back at the events of September to November 2020, is whether or not this was an intelligence failure on the part of the US government, that we saw this, we didn't see this coming, at which point we need to have some serious reforms in the way our intelligence is gathered and distributed to those that need to know. Or was it a deliberate decision to look the other way? There has to be an answer one way or another, and I would call on the Armenian community to pressure Congress, members of both sides, to get to the bottom of this. It's a matter of historical truth and not making the same mistake twice. The last thing I want to say, or two last things I want to say. When it comes to the State Department, it's not simply an issue of Section 907. If Azerbaijan will not allow diplomats from Yerevan to observe what's going on at Lachin Corridor, why the heck is the State Department not tasking a diplomat from the American Embassy in Baku to go and station themselves permanently, pitch a tent if need be, to observe and record? Genocides don't happen when the light is shining on them. They happen in darkness. I want to conclude with one point. While Congress, both houses, have done an admirable job of raising the issue of genocide, and while President Biden, as Speaker Pelosi said, distinguished himself by becoming the first candidate to actually keep good on his promises, it's important not simply to have a cut and paste job this April 24th, not simply to pay homage to what happened 108 years ago. Because as Robert has said, as many of the members who have spoken here have said, genocide is looming. We hear it in the words. If we want to look back at the lessons of Rwanda and the anti-Tutsi genocide and the tests for looming genocide, we see that now. So it's important that the White House, from the bully pulpit, not take the easy way out and simply use a template of last year, but rather focus and call out what is going on as looming genocide, as genocide version 2.0. Because if that message comes from the White House, what we will see is that Azerbaijan is a paper tiger, just like Turkey was with the original genocide resolution, and they will be put on notice that the world is not going to allow this to happen again. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for those compassionate words. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is the Executive Director of In Defense of Christians, Richard Gazal. Please, the podium is yours.
Your Eminence, good evening. Friends, good evening. Over the last decade, In Defense of Christians has known no greater friend than the Armenian National Committee of America. We're honored to be in the trenches with you every day and stand with you today as we commemorate the Armenian Genocide, which took the lives of over 1.5 million Armenians and 1.5 million other Christians, Greeks, Syriacs, Assyrians, Chaldeans, Maronites, for a total of 3 million Christians. I learned about the Armenian Genocide as a child through oral tradition. I too am a grandchild of this genocide. In 1915, a few members of my family who were able to survive the massacres sought refuge in a city called Adana. At the time, it was under French mandate. They shared neighbors, neighborhoods, churches, and orphanages with several fellow survivors, Armenian survivors. The fellowship between Syriacs, Assyrians, Chaldeans, and Armenians, and Greeks, is forged in blood, tragedy, and most importantly, survival. The century that followed the Armenian Genocide was catastrophic for Christians in the Middle East. Prior to the Armenian Genocide, Christians constituted over 20% of the total population of the Middle East. Today, Christians constitute less than 2%, and there's no question at all, that the Armenian Genocide triggered a sequence of events that set the stage for the century-long genocide that we witness even today. Impunity for the Armenian Genocide has set dangerous precedent and showed the world that it's okay to destroy entire ethnic and religious groups. There's been no accountability for these acts, and the absence of consequences encourages greater evil. Hitler used this very logic to justify in his mind, and the mind of his followers, the destruction and murder of 6 million Jews. Because after all, who today speaks of the Armenian Genocide? Even today, Turkish President Erdogan refers to Christians as the remnants, the leftovers of the sword. According to him, the genocide has not yet been completed. We see the genocide continue even to this day by Azerbaijan, supported by Turkey itself, in war crimes against Armenians in Artsakh, and in the form of war crimes by Turkey against Christians in Syria, Iraq, Cyprus, and yes, even Christians in Nigeria, where Turkey supplies arms to an ISIS franchise known as Boko Haram. After a century of indifference, the United States finally recognized the Armenian Genocide in April of 2021. But now the United States is faced with yet another opportunity to fix broken foreign policy. Discontinue aid to Azerbaijan today and say no to the sale of advanced fighter jets to Turkey, jets that will be used to destroy the Armenian homeland and continue the genocide of the final Christian communities remaining in the Middle East. In Defense of Christians is proud to stand with Armenian friends to bring conscience to U.S. foreign policy. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for having me. God bless you.
Thank you, Richard. Our next speaker is Diliman Abdul Qadar, who is the president of the American Friends of Kurdistan. Diliman.
Thank you, everyone, for having me today. You know, I grew up in a refugee camp for 7 years under authoritarian regimes. Then it was Saddam Hussein. Today it's Turkey and little Turkey, Azerbaijan. We have to acknowledge why Turkey doesn't recognize the Armenian genocide. Its intent is to repeat the genocide. We have to recognize why Azerbaijan wants to occupy Armenia and Artsakh. Together with Turkey, their intent is to erase the Armenian people from the region. We have to be honest with ourselves what's going on in the region on the ground today. Turkey and Azerbaijan are afraid of your distinct culture, of your language, of your history. Just like the Kurds, if they take 1 inch from you, whether it be in Armenia or Artsakh, their goal is to annex the land and eventually normalize and take over and call it another Turkey. We have to recognize these atrocities that are happening against these vulnerable minorities and communities on the ground in the Middle East and in Armenia and Artsakh. In 2018, Turkey led an invasion to occupy northwest Syria, Afrin. To this day, majority 95% Kurdish. To this day, Turkey occupies Afrin. And now it calls it Turkey. They hand out Turkish ID cards. There's Turkish flags flying in that area. They have Islamified the region, forcing Kurds who are Christians to convert into Islam. This is what Azerbaijan wants to do as well. With the intelligence sharing between Azerbaijan and Turkey, with the military assistance that it receives from Turkey. We have to call on Congress. We have to work together, and that's why I'm proud, as American Friends of Kurdistan, I'm proud to stand with the Armenian people today to prevent another genocide, to stop it right now as it's happening, because if we don't, Turkey eventually will connect with Azerbaijan and just call it one. It'll be just one giant Turkey, and that's their main goal, is to revive the Ottoman Empire. These are the facts that we have to pay attention to. These are the facts that we have to acknowledge. Once we acknowledge what's going on the ground, we can implement sanctions against Azerbaijan. We can implement sanctions against Turkey. Because as my colleague Richard stated, if we do give them weapons, make no mistake, it'll be used to erase these vulnerable peoples like Armenia and Artsakh. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you. We now have Steve Oshana, who will be speaking to us. He is the Executive Director of A Demand for Action. Steve.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here, Your Eminence. I'm going to borrow the phrase "Little Turkey" from my friend. I've never heard that before, so I'm borrowing that. So my name is Steve Oshana. I'm the Executive Director of Demand for Action from the Assyrian Chaldean Syriac community. I'm also Armenian myself, and every time I come to one of these events, the crowd gets bigger. The number of members of Congress who come speak grow in numbers. There's more and more legislation passed, and this to me is the height of what Armenian advocacy looks like. So I think you all should be very proud of yourselves for everything you've accomplished. One thing with Assyrian, Chaldean, Syriacs, Greeks, Armenians is that we are so inextricably linked, both in our faith and in our suffering. And our suffering is so deeply rooted in our faith that to try to untangle that would be impossible. And so our advocacy together is so important. And I would just like to take a moment to thank the Armenian National Committee of America for being steadfast partners of ours every time when our community has faced struggles. And we are absolutely proud to stand with you in this time of need. We've worked with the Armenian community and our friends in Congress over the years on genocide recognition. And at one point, we were so laser focused on getting the genocide recognized that I thought when the U.S. recognized that the fight would be over and we'd all be able to go home. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way for us. And so what we see now with the illegal blockade of Azerbaijan and Artsakh, what we see the aggression of Turkey towards the Kurdish community, towards Assyrians, and towards the Greeks in Cyprus, it's a constant reminder that the genocide is, quite frankly, not over, right? We talk about stopping a second genocide, when in reality, Erdogan and Aliyev are really bent on finishing the job that they started. And we obviously, as our organization, support the immediate passage of HRES 108. The fact that the U.S. continues to supply arms to a terrorist country like Azerbaijan is criminal as far as I'm concerned. The fact that we're still talking about sending jets to Turkey, a country that has not only proven that they can't handle American weapons, but have actively stood in the way of the U.S.'s effort to use our own weapons that they control in its Incirlik Air Base. And so, we stand in solidarity with you. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I will say that for everybody here, keep doing what you're doing. We've heard members of Congress. We've heard everybody talk about what the situation is on the ground, and we know that, but you know, the march for justice is long. The fight for justice is long. You know, and one of the things that I've come to learn in my years in Washington is that the enemy is not going to let up. You know, Turkey and Azerbaijan spend a lot of money hiring very expensive lobbyists to fight us every day. And, you know, while we may be tired, while it may be hard, you know, every single person in this room, we have to continue our fight. We have to continue doing the work that we do, because as we've learned, our enemy is not going to stop. And so, you know, just to the people of Artsakh, to the people of Armenia, the Assyrian community stands in solidarity with you, and we will always be by your side. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I would like to ask Aaron Davor, who is the board member of the Armenian Assembly of America and Associate Dean at George Washington University Law School.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished members of Congress, honored clergy, esteemed guests, we've gathered here today to commemorate the 108th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide and to contemplate our shared responsibility to prevent the recurrence of this tragedy. Our assembly here today at the United States Capitol is appropriate because that structure behind you is the hallowed symbol of American democracy and the rule of law. It stands in stark contrast to the jingoist, dictatorial regime of Azerbaijan that promotes state-sponsored hate and genocidal acts against Armenia in Artsakh, in Armenia, and elsewhere. It's been said that no law can prevent its own violation. Unfortunately, we are seeing this right now. Even as determined by the International Court of Justice in 3 successive indications of provisional measures against Azerbaijan for violating the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, that country persists to defy the highest body of international law as set forth by the United Nations Convention. I'm holding the opinion from February 22 this year. It's paragraph 62. The court concludes that Azerbaijan shall, pending the final decision in the case, and in accordance with its obligations under the convention, take all measures at its disposal to ensure unimpeded movement of persons, vehicles, and cargo along the Lachin corridor in both directions. Victory in law, but not in outcome. Unfortunately, even in the United States, rule of law does not always prevail. We need look no further than our own U.S. Department of State and its waiver of Section 907 of the Freedom Support Act on that score. Right now, indigenous Armenian populations have been subjected to a consistent campaign of brutalization in Artsakh and within the internationally recognized borders of the Republic of Armenia for many years, but acutely since 2020. Under the cloak of COVID lockdowns, Azerbaijan, with the assistance of its allies and foreign mercenaries, displaced and killed thousands of ethnic Armenians from their ancestral lands in Artsakh. We have witnessed the 2020 conflict, the 2016 conflict, and the after effects of an ineffective and porous peacekeeping mission by the Russian Federations. For Armenians worldwide and in this room, this feels like a second Armenian genocide is happening. In fact, perhaps a second Armenian genocide is about to happen. The urgency cannot be more significant than it is right now. Issue advocating, organizing, and knowledge sharing to prevent a second Armenian genocide is a key and dominant mission of the Armenian Assembly of America. Since 1972, the Assembly has promoted the public awareness of Armenian issues, encouraged Armenian American participation in the American democratic process, and assisted in humanitarian development programs in Armenia and Artsakh while strengthening the U.S.-Armenia relationship. Just this year, the Assembly has submitted testimony and partnered with researchers at Columbia University on critical human rights issues like reopening the Lachin corridor. It's hosted an advocacy conference and met with many of the members that you saw speak today. As an Armenian Assembly intern and alumnus from 2003, 20 years ago, and a board member of the Assembly, I am thankful to all of those who spoke today. As we reflect upon the important milestones achieved, whether it be the historic passage of the Armenian Genocide Resolution in both the House and the Senate in 2019, or the presidential statements affirming Armenian genocide, and the proud chapter in U.S. history in helping to save our people, giving the ongoing and existential threats against Armenia and Artsakh. It is important for us to reflect that there is a lot of work to be done. Let's see what we can get done by April 24th, 2024.
Our next speaker is the chair of the Congressional Armenian Staff Association, Maria Martirosyan. Please join us here at the podium. There she is.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here tonight. My name is Maria Martirosyan Isahanyan. We just got married. And I'm lucky to be the president of the Congressional Armenian Staff Association. We were formally established in 2017 as the official, nonpartisan, bicameral Congressional Staff Association organized and recognized by the House Committee on Administration and sponsored by the congressional chairs of the Congressional Armenian Caucus. As many of you know, CASA aims to recruit, retain, and advance Armenian American staffers in the U.S. House and U.S. Senate, and is dedicated to encouraging career development and increasing opportunities to its members. At this point, although we are still quite underrepresented, I'm proud to say that CASA has roughly 60 Armenian Americans who currently work for members of Congress, committees, both on the House and Senate side. These staffers, many of whom are direct descendants of Armenian genocide survivors, work each day at the nation's capital to support members of Congress shaping domestic and international policies. While centuries of persecution and displacement may have resulted in lost family histories, generational trauma, and lost economic opportunities, it has also instilled in us the ability to survive, persevere, and thrive. And today, Armenian American congressional staff harness their experience, strengths, and talents to help shape the future of this nation and the world. As a congressional staffer myself, I have seen firsthand the importance of having a rich, diverse background, perspective, and experience, particularly when it comes to advancing critical domestic and international policies around the world and here. Members, for hiring, we want to thank members for hiring Armenian American staff and providing them with opportunities to work in Congress. We can ensure that their voices, that our voices are heard and our contributions are valued. And when young Armenian Americans across the country see individuals who look like them and share their cultural background working in Congress, they are also inspired to pursue similar career paths. That's why we encourage everyone interested in serving in Capitol Hill to use CASA as a resource and ask members of Congress to continue to hire and promote Armenian American staffers. Thank you for your attention, and let's continue to work towards a more diverse and inclusive workplace.
Thank you, Maria, and congratulations once again. It would not be an Armenian event here in Washington, D.C. without hearing from Aram Hamparian, who is the Executive Director of the Armenian National Committee of America.
We have no better friend than our Greek American brothers and sisters, Dean, Andy, the rest of the team. No better friend. They say at the end of long programs like this that pretty much everything has been said, but not everyone has said it. So I guess it falls to me to be the last person to say whatever has already been said. I'll make a couple of comments. First, Maria and the Staff Association does tremendous work. These are people now in their 20s and 30s, some of them in their 40s, who will continue to serve in public life and I think be a very, very valuable voice for our community for decades to come. So that's a great investment. What kind of event would this be if I didn't embarrass at least one person who's among us today? And that person is right here, Ambassador John Evans. I'm going to go wait a second. You'll have a reason to clap. You'll have a reason to clap. It was almost 20 years ago that he had the courage to speak up and speak out, consulted with the legal department over at the Department of State, studied the history of the Armenian Genocide, the law, the facts, and ultimately came to the conclusion that what happened was an Armenian genocide. During a tour of Armenian communities, he had the courage to answer questions asked to him by Americans in an honest and forthright way. Yes, there was an Armenian genocide, and for that, he saw a distinguished career in the Foreign Service, 35 years, cut short. To this day, the Department of State has yet to apologize for having done that. He is owed, Ambassador Evans is owed an apology by the Department of State. Can I have a round of applause for that one? An owed apology. He was also granted the Christian Herder Award for Constructive Dissent, because what could be more constructive than dissent against the policy of genocide denial that our government held for decades at the behest of Turkey, a policy written in Ankara, exported to Washington, enforced by president after president, and broken by a brave ambassador. He was granted that award by the very people inside the system who saw the courage it took to stand up to those lies. And that was taken away from him. It was denied to him. He is owed that award, and he is owed an apology. Thank you so much. Could you guys give round of applause again for Ambassador Evans? You know, people sometimes say, what can an ambassador do? We've had some issues over the years with some of your ambassadors, with some of your predecessors, with some of your successors, and we've been asked, well, I'm just the ambassador, what can I do? And the answer to that is actually two answers. The first is John Marshall Evans. The second is Henry Morgenthau. Ambassadors can do great things. Thank you very much. One of my pet projects, and this may take longer than shorter, is for the street in front of the Turkish ambassador's residence to be named after either Henry Morgenthau or John Evans. So I had to call out Ambassador Evans, and I just have such great respect for him. And I'm now going to, because I could say a lot, I'm just going to say one thing. I'm going to pivot to what Diliman said. Diliman is our Kurdish brother. We've been in many fights together, as in with Rich, as with Dean, as with Steve. So many partners are here. We've really been in the trenches with us, where you find where your true friends are. You mentioned today about the existential nature of Turkey's ambitions. This is absolutely essential. It's a lesson for us as Armenians, because we are, if nothing else, a hopeful people. A hopeful people. And we hold out the hope, the expectation, that we can talk our way or trade our way to peace. Talk our way or trade our way to peace. If only we are reasonable enough, if only we are eloquent enough, if only our reason is strong enough, we will find a path to peace with the Turks, large Turkey and small Turkey. Or, alternately, that we can trade our way to peace, right? That we can give so that we can get. And the deal is something like, you give land, meaning we give land, and then they give us peace. Now, if that proposition worked, if the idea that Armenians surrendering just a little more land will deliver to us the peace that we so desperately need, if that were true, right, then you would think that perhaps Kars, Ardahan, all the provinces of Western Armenia
Nakhichevan, and now 75% of Artsakh. Perhaps that land would meet that test. That the Turks would look and say, we now own 90% plus of the land formerly inhabited by Armenians, let us now give them peace. But no. Having taken that 90% has only made them hungrier for the remaining 10%. The idea, again, it's so deep in our souls because we're very hopeful people. We're very hopeful people. The idea that we can talk our way or trade our way to peace, sadly, is a fiction. It's simply not in the cards. We can, just in the last few days, we saw the surrender, essentially, of even more land in Sunni. The hope, no doubt, behind that surrender is something like, when the Azeris get what they want, they will reciprocate with peace. The sad answer is they will not. The land that we have, we must hold. The land that they seek to take, we must defend. There is no alternative. Here in the US, we represent the Armenian American community, a second army of sorts. Now, that's not to take anything away from the first army. There's no one who deserves more credit, more respect, more love than the soldiers of the Artsakh army, the soldiers of the Armenian army. They serve and sacrifice. We saw 4 of these brave young men killed in just the past week, 6 more injured, thankfully not critically so. They are the first line of defense, but we represent a second line of defense, a second army of the Armenian people. Our wars are not fought with guns, but with pen and paper, with computers, emails, but our job is very, very critical. The tasks before us, as you know, you've heard it said, many of the members touched on this, are really twofold. The twin tasks before us. Ending US military aid to Azerbaijan. People say sometimes, I hear this from folks in the State Department, the White House, what can we possibly do with such a complicated problem? You know, we don't know where to start. It's like, how about this? Start by not arming the party that's doing the killing. Start by not arming, not aiding, not abetting the party that is the aggressor. Now, our State Department, I say this to their faces, and I'll say it to you now, our State Department has a very hard time identifying who the aggressor is. Really, really hard time. No matter what happens, every act of Azerbaijani aggression is met with a generic call on both sides to cut it out. Thanks to Congressman Adam Schiff, who you heard speak earlier, he got some language in the Intelligence Authorization Act, which we strongly supported, that asked the CIA, basically, the Director of National Intelligence, to actually assess the proposition. Who is the aggressor? Who is the aggressor? And it took the better part of a year, but the report was issued by the Director of National Intelligence that the most likely aggressor is Azerbaijan, right? Our intelligence agencies, and we're very well funded, considerably more so than the State Department, they know very well who the aggressor is. The President knows who the aggressor is. The State Department knows who the aggressor is, but they're afraid of upsetting Ilham Aliyev's tender sensitivities, and as a result, we end up with this endless stream of generic calls on both sides to cut it out when they know very well who the aggressor is. So, number one priority, end U.S. military aid to Azerbaijan. That can be done by the President himself, by not waiving Section 907 this spring or summer. It can be done by Congress by enforcing Section 907, denying the President the authority to waive it. It can be done also through something called a 502B process, which is a provision of the Foreign Aid Act that was written back in the 1970s, has yet to be enforced, but should be enforced against Azerbaijan. I demand, number one, end U.S. military aid to Azerbaijan. Number two, send U.S. humanitarian aid to Artsakh. Send U.S. humanitarian to Artsakh. I make a special point of following the USAID Twitter feed, and I am proud as an American regarding the billions of dollars that we have sent abroad to Yemen, to Gaza, to Burma, all over the world. We have helped every at-risk population you can imagine, with one exception. The little asterisk there on the USAID website, except Artsakh. Except Artsakh. The most recent excuse was, well, there's a blockade. Okay, explain to us where you were for the 2 years before the blockade. There is a U.S. policy against aiding Artsakh. That is a U.S. policy of complicity in Azerbaijan's efforts to ethnically cleanse this population. They don't get food. They aren't helped with their water security, no medicine. It's a very, very destructive policy. USAID has no answer for it. The State Department gets asked all the time by us and by members of Congress. They can't answer that question either. So those are the twin challenges before us. There is, as always, much more to be said, and
as always, I would like to say it. But with that, I'm going to thank you all for being here, for staying so late, for hearing me out, and I'm done.
Thank you. Right now we have a senator from California, Alex Padilla here. He's a longtime friend and supporter of the Armenian American community. Senator, the podium is yours.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you all for the welcome and for the opportunity to be with you this evening and to share a few words and to be together in remembrance of all those lost in the Armenian Genocide. And yes, that is exactly what it was. I want to thank the Armenian National Committee of America for convening us here in the nation's capital to help keep this important history alive in front of mind. You know, 108 years after Ottoman Turkey savagely persecuted the Armenian people, we have the images in our minds, seared in our hearts. Families fleeing from their homes, mass murder, over 1 million men, women, and children. We still carry their pain across generations, as we must, because it's important to celebrate their memory. We refuse to allow this history to be rewritten or glossed over. As you heard in the introduction, I'm a United States Senator representing, I'm proud to represent California, home to the largest Armenian American population in the country. A big part of that privilege, a big part of that blessing is seeing firsthand what the Armenian community means to every community in California. I was born and raised and still live in the San Fernando Valley. All right, we got a valley delegation. And so it is an understatement to say we don't have to go very far to find a business owner, a neighbor, a friend, friends of my kids in school that are Armenian or Armenian descent. And every April, of course, as we approach this Remembrance Day, we see so many Armenian flags on cars and the windows of stores. We count on the Armenian American community as moral leaders in California, reminding us of the horrors of genocide and calling on us at all levels of government, by the way, not just in Congress, calling on all of us to prevent future tragedies. And so I feel a strong connection and obligation to you all to be a voice here in the United States Senate. That's why when I first joined the Senate in 2021, I did not hesitate to be one of the many urging President Biden to be the first president in the history of our country to formally recognize the Armenian Genocide. Because the facts cannot be disputed. And I'm so proud that President Biden did just that. He heeded our calls, not just mine, so many of us. But he had the courage to do what was right. So when he did so, it meant our message collectively sent a strong signal, not just to the Armenian community, but to the whole world, that we must never allow this to happen again. So again, we remember every year as one of the many ways we commemorate those that were lost. We honor them through commemoration. We honor them through education. And by calling out the wrongs we see unfolding this very day, including, as you heard so passionately from a number of speakers, the senseless Azerbaijani attacks on the Armenian people in Artsakh. That is wrong. In the Senate, I too have called for increased humanitarian assistance, for assistance in rebuilding and the resettlement of the Armenian victims in the region. And I'm proud to share that I will very soon be introducing a Senate resolution condemning Azerbaijan for the blockade that is being and not just condemning Azerbaijan, but urging the United States government to take immediate steps to end the ongoing and growing humanitarian crisis. The U.S. government needs to live up to its word that we will never ignore the warning signs of genocide, and we will never let this happen again. It is time to act. And for that, I am so grateful again for this Congress to keeping the issue alive, keeping our history front and center, and holding us to the higher moral standard that we claim in the United States. Thank you all so very, very much.
Thank you, Senator. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our evening. I want to thank all the speakers. I want to thank all of you. And I just want you to know that as a Greek American, I consider myself Armenian by experience. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Please join us for some food and beverages. Otherwise, I hope to see everyone here next year.
Thank you, Dean.
It has to be touched inside the
Yes. So after they left, originally my family was in Southeast Turkey. So they left, so my family Syriac. We don't know the exact year, but 19, something like that. About less than 10 years, maybe 7 years or so. And then from there they went to Beirut. What would you like?
Outside this, I am Armenian journalist. Sure. Actually, we talked on Zoom at some point.
Sure.